seasons. Treat these streets like Flint, bro. Cause our God can spark up the dark in the hearts of the hardest and parted. Let's go.
Every night, like it's the last night, like it's the last time. You get no other chance. Get your torches high, let's set a flame to sky. Passions on fire bright, and we'll be burning forever.
Let's set the world on fire.
He's a distance runner in the 1970s in Oregon. He's kind of this hippie dude who just runs long distances for fun. Which we have people here that do that. I've never done that in my life and probably never will. But this dude was just a sick, nasty runner. He set records in every event, U.S. records in every event from the 2,000 meter to the 10,000 meter. I don't know how many events are within that, but that at least is an 8,000 meter difference, so I'll give him credit. So, he's setting records in every event, but one thing you need to know about Steve Prefontaine is he's a front runner. So when he ran, he would always, the gun would sound, and he would get out in front of everybody, like way out in front of everybody. And so he would always try to be way out in front of everybody, and he ran, a lot of people said, he ran with like such a sense of urgency. And so, tying it in, you know, we're unmistakably urgent, but Steve Prefontaine had this unbelievably crazy sense of urgency to win. Even to the point, this is what he said one time. He said, somebody may beat me, somebody may catch me, but they're going to have to bleed to do it. Like, to me, that's insane to say to somebody, like, you're going to have to catch me, but you're not going to catch me without, like, literally bleeding. Like, it's going to take everything you got. And so he always talks a lot about, like, guts and glory and all these different things, and he always talks about his sense and why he runs is to be number one. Okay? And so he ran with an urgency that's unparalleled, and he had to finish what he started. All right? And so I feel like that's how we are in our Christian lives a lot, is we start with this sense of urgency because we want to grow in our faith. But after a while, we don't want to finish what we started because the call becomes really difficult. I mean, last week we talked about kingdom vision, and we talked about how it's our call as followers of Jesus to reach the world. And that call involves us making decisions and being led in sometimes direction that we don't really understand. And so this week, what we're trying to get at is there's a sense of urgency that comes with it. We know we need to fulfill this kingdom vision, but we don't really know the sense of urgency that comes with that. We don't really know what Jesus talks about or what Jesus says about a sense of urgency. I feel like in the church today, what we've made it out to be is we're all like, yeah, we really need to reach people. Like, reaching people is so good and everything. And so then the pastor's like, yeah, I should call a meeting about reaching people. And so they hold this meeting about reaching people. And those people are like, yeah, man, we need to do that. We need to do that. And so they set up a sub-meeting or like a subcommittee about the best way to reach that person or those groups of people. And so then they're like, yes, that's good. But you know what? We probably need to meet for at least another 3 or 4 months before we actually take the step to like actually put this in action. Okay, so then they put this in action, right? They put this plan in action, and it's like one Saturday at like a horribly planned time, and they see like one person come to know the Lord, and all of a sudden this person becomes your professional. And so he doesn't actually teach anybody, or he becomes a teacher of how to reach people, but then it's his job to start forming the committees and the subcommittees and the committees. And all of a sudden what we have in the church is a bunch of people that meet about doing nothing. It's like we say it's good, we say it's awesome, but we don't ever do it. And so one thing I want to guard against is AIA becoming a group of people who comes here and meets and talks about, yeah, I want to reach my campus, but then says, we should probably meet every week for the next 10 to 12 weeks before we do something. Like, that's not our call. There's an urgency to a life of following Jesus that should parallel that of Prefontaine. He ran with ran with an urgency, and he wanted it so bad. Inside, he knew running was his call, and he wanted it so bad. Inside, just like we talked about last week, all of us have a call. As believers in Jesus, we're all called to reach our world. And I hope that we can take that, and that we can have a sense of urgency in that, and say, okay, I'm not going to wait around for anybody. I'm going to take it upon myself. And we talked about being Spirit-filled, and of course do that in the power of the Holy Spirit. But we want to have an urgency when we're talking to people about Jesus. Now, here we go. I've got to check this a minute. What I don't mean, please don't run up to someone, beat them over the head with the Bible, and tell them, you're a sinner, you're dying, you're going to hell, the end, repent, believe. Okay? That's dumb. And I'll hold this committee meeting right now. Don't do that. Okay? Committee adjourned. And so we've been called by Jesus to bring other people to Jesus. Okay? Is that pretty clear? I just want to make sure, like, we understand. This is our call. This is what we're called to do. This is a scary thing. I'm not going to try to sit here and be like, this is the easiest thing I've done ever in my life, and so it should be easy for you. And it's easy to talk about, but it's not easy to do it. And so we're going to look at 2 Corinthians 5:18 through 20 tonight. Probably should find it in my own Bible too. If you need a Bible, Brandon has some. And it says,
hold on 1 second.
okay, 2 Corinthians 5.
There's a table of contents at the beginning of the Bible. Find that chapter.
It's after 1 Corinthians. Megan.
After 1 Corinthians.
Send it back. 2 Corinthians 5.
After Romans.
We good? We're getting there? Alright, cool.
5 what? 18?
18 through 20.
803 in these Bibles.
803. It says, all of this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. That God was reconciling the world to himself in Christ, not counting men's sins against them, and he has committed to us the message of reconciliation. We are therefore Christ's ambassadors, as though God were making his appeal through us. We implore you, on Christ's behalf, be reconciled to God. So we look at this passage, and there's 3 distinct things that Paul is talking about being ambassador, or that Paul is talking about that we kind of need to define. Okay, number 1 is that we've become messengers of reconciliation, and so
Can you define reconciliation for me?
yes, I can. That's what I'm about to do.
Okay.
So when he says we're a messenger of reconciliation, that means we're in the act of reconciling. Okay, to reconcile means to reestablish a close relationship between 2 things. So when it says that we're called to be messengers of reconciliation, that means that we're called to help people reestablish a relationship with God, a close relationship with God. Does that make sense? They use a lot of big terms that you can just box up and say, like, this is what it actually means. And so, you know, it's talking about we've been given this, we're ministers of reconciliation, of bringing people into a close relationship with God. We're making an appeal, okay, which is an urgent request to somebody. And notice, in all these definitions that I'm looking up, the word urgency just kept coming up. Like, we're not beating around the bush. Like, this is something that as a call, you don't get time off. You know, you're a minister of reconciliation. You're a messenger of God desiring a relationship with us no matter where you go, no matter what you do. And so God is making an appeal, which is an urgent request. And he says, we implore you. We implore you. Okay, and implore literally means that Paul is begging these people. come back to Jesus. Come back to Jesus. Okay, last night we talked about this world that we look around and we see that things aren't right. We see hurt, we see despair, we see people hurt each other. We do stuff we don't want to do. And God is saying, look, the only cure for that is Jesus. Share Jesus. Bring reconciliation. Bring back into a close relationship with me. And implore literally means to beg. Now, I know that sounds horrible, horrible, horrible. But I think this is showing a little bit of Paul's desire. Paul's desire. Literally, Paul is saying, I beg and plead for you. I will go to prison so that you can know Jesus. Paul says that. Paul goes to prison over and over. If you know anything about the Bible in the New Testament, Paul is constantly in jail. For any reason, wherever he's at, anytime, any place. Paul wrote a ton of the letters that are in here from a prison cell. In some of those letters, he talks about, hey, look, I brought the guy who actually works at the jail. He came to know Jesus. And in others, he's telling people, hey, come to know Jesus. But I think what he's really getting at is he's saying, whatever it takes, even if it means begging you, I want you to know Jesus. There's a quote by this guy named D.T. Niles, and he said that sharing our faith with a sense of urgency, we can have pride sometimes. And when we talk to somebody like, I found it, you don't got it. Sorry. We can talk real prideful. We can just be blatant. I'm better than you because I have it and you don't. But he put it this way. He says, sharing your faith with somebody is one beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. One beggar telling another beggar where to find bread. I need it just as bad as you do. I found it and I want you to have it too. And so I implore you, man, find it. I beg you, find it. That's what Jesus is all about. He wants to be in a close relationship with each person. And guess what? It says that Jesus has committed the ministry of bringing a right relationship with God to us. It says that we are the ambassadors. And so I want to throw out three things that we need to consider. And we're going to be real short tonight, amazingly. Three things to consider. We're an ambassador. All right? What does it mean to be an ambassador? An ambassador is an official of top rank chosen to represent an entity, usually in a foreign land. So Christ calls us his ambassadors. What does that mean? Well, see, an ambassador is a mouthpiece. We send, as America, we send ambassadors to different countries all over the world, and they're the mouthpiece for the president. The president says basically, this is what I want to do here, and he speaks and says, this is what I want to do in this country. This is what the U.S. is going to do in this country. Another thing is he's an example. A lot of the time, what an ambassador does and how an ambassador carries himself is the stereotype or the belief that a lot of people put on that person. So, you know what? If an ambassador carries himself highly with tons of prestige, people are going to have the idea that the U.S. is kind of this like stuck-up country. And so, their perception of the perceptions of different countries of ambassadors directly affect what people think about that country. And the same thing is our relationship with Jesus. We're an ambassador. We're his mouthpiece. What we say about Jesus, people ultimately, that's what people ultimately hear. That's who they think Jesus is. And so when we say something, literally, we are a mouthpiece for Jesus. When God says he's committed to us, the message of reconciliation, he says, literally, people are going to be brought into a closer relationship to Christ because of the words you speak to them. They can be words that bring people closer to Christ, or they're going to be words that just are totally detrimental to their relationship. We're the mouthpiece. We're the example. What people see about us when we declare that we're a Christian, that's ultimately what they believe a Christian is. So if they see us doing something stupid, that's what they think. They think, oh, this is fake. Jesus must not really be impacting their life because I don't see that. I hear all the time that Jesus is supposed to be this guy that changes our life. That's what we always say. When you come to Jesus, he meets you where you're at and he's never going to leave you the way you are. Because he's going to reconcile that relationship. He's going to bring you back into close relationship with himself. But ultimately, it's through people who believe in Jesus being the mouthpieces and the examples of Jesus that people are going to see it and want it. I think I visited Italy a few years ago. I shared about that a little last week. And I went over there and I met some people that identified themselves as Christians. And man, it made me want to quit. These people were one of the most dull, boring. They didn't give a rip about the people around them. They just holed up in their little church. And so if you literally go to churches in Rome, there are hundreds of churches in Rome. And now all they are these little antique shops where you go in and you're like, that's a cool relic. That's a cool relic. But the thing missing from the churches in Rome is people. And that's because the Christians there failed to be an ambassador for Jesus there. They decided that something else was better. They decided that something else was more worth it, and they didn't believe that it was urgent to tell other people about Jesus. I think we see that today in our culture, is we get so apathetic. I can do what I want. Right? Everything about the U.S. tells us you're independent, you make your own decisions, do what you want, do what makes you happy, and do what you please. If you want it, take it. And I think the gospel and the ministry of reconciliation tells us something totally different. It says it's not about us. It says that we have a sense of urgency in telling people that that they're called to be in a close relationship with Jesus. And so when I say that, when I make that statement and then I don't do it, I'm literally saying these are the things that are more important than following Jesus. These are more things that are more important than God. And so the next thing to consider is our time. We need to recognize that we're finite and God is infinite. We don't have a lot of time here. I'm not here to be bleak, but I will make this statement. We live like we have tomorrow way too often. We live confidently knowing that we're going to have tomorrow. But I will tell you, tomorrow is never promised to you. How do you want? How would people remember you? The time that you've spent here on earth, how would people remember you if today was your last day? How? That's something that that eats at me. Because there are days where I just don't care. There are days that I'm like, yeah, man, I feel like I really got it. But ultimately, guys, we don't know the time we have. And don't assume anything. Don't live like you have 100 more years. Live like you know, like you don't have tomorrow promised to you. And ultimately, the weight of that is immense on what we believe about glorify God to the best that we know how today. We want everyone to know. If you knew that there was a hostage situation and your best friend was held hostage, you're not going to sit back and be like, yo man, I'm going to wait till tomorrow. Probably will be better. Maybe a couple days. Maybe I'll negotiate, but I'm not paying the money. We got time. Right? Like, I'm not letting my friend, I'm not letting my family who's taken hostage, I'm not leaving them there, and I'm not saying, I have time, I'll wait a couple of days, because at that moment, I'm thinking, wow, this is now, this is real. It's in the moments that life becomes real that we look back and we reflect on how our life was really lived. And so can we look at today and say, today I had the opportunity to be an ambassador for Jesus. And I had the opportunity, I took the opportunity. I was the mouthpiece and the example of Jesus to the people that I met. You see, disciples of Jesus aren't defined by how they start the Christian life, but they're remembered by how they finish it. They're remembered by how they finish it. Jim Elliot was a missionary to a group of Indians in the South American jungle, down in the Amazon. Jim Elliot decided that he was going to go and knew it might cost him his own life. But he said, the mission of God is too urgent for me to wait another day. Jim Elliot and five other of his friends flew a plane onto a landing strip on the shore. The next day they found all their bodies. Now, we say, that's terrible. That's terrible. But let me tell you, Jim Elliot was urgent. He knew that those people needed to see Jesus. And did you know that today, because Jim Elliot landed a plane and attempted to talk to those Auca Indians, today they know Jesus. Because one person decided that the urgency of someone knowing Jesus was worth their life. Today, those tribes down there, the Auca Indians, they can know and express the love of Jesus and can be the ambassadors for Jesus down there because one person thought it was worth it. One person said, I have the time and I'm going to give it. I don't know what tomorrow is going to hold, but I know they need it. I know what life after death looks like for me, but I don't know what it looks like for them. And it stings to think about what that might be. Also, consider God's commitment to us. How we respond to God's sacrifice shows what we truly think of that sacrifice. I just had an opportunity to lead a Bible study before this, and we talked a little bit about saying one thing and doing another. And so many times, as I was just sitting there reflecting upon my life, reflecting upon the idea of saying one thing and doing another, how many times I communicate to people, you need to share Jesus, and how many times I communicate to people, you need to know Jesus, but I don't live like they need to know Jesus, because I don't live urgently. I don't live like this is something that's important to me sometimes. So how I respond to God's sacrifice shows what I truly think of it. It shows really where my heart is at. It shows me that if I really think that Jesus is worth it, that he's worth everything, he's worth my whole life, he's worth every word I say, he's worth everything I do. Because if I don't, I'm basically saying, God, your sacrifice was good, but it was good for me. And I live a selfish faith. Because everything is about me and the things God gives me. call to give it away. I deny the call to give it away. So I want to ask you guys. Does your time, does your knowledge of God's sacrifice affect the way you live your life? If that's not the case, we know it in our head, but we fail to live it out in our heart. We can say, I know Jesus, but I don't want anybody to know Jesus. That just doesn't make sense. So I want to leave you guys with the question, the big question. What will be the legacy you leave? Tomorrow's not promised to you.